All right, I think I left off on the number boards. So let's see. For function 24, it's going to be the ground lights. And I've got nothing on that so far that will require me to remove the cab and put the two lights. I'm going to replace what they've got. And then I'll have two wires come up. One will tie on to the common positive, and the next one will tie into FX4 on mine. Now that's just how I'm doing it. So the first function will light up the ground lights, and then the second function is going to be for the walkway, front and rear. So this is what I had figured out. It did have a black wire here. I removed it because that's for this LED in the nose, and I will not be using that. The green is for the walkway, and you can run it straight over to the FX of your choice. In my case, it's going to be under, let me double check this. All right, I just changed something on my phone because it kind of wigged out on me. So as I was saying, the front walkway light, no ground, doesn't need one. So this is 1,000 ohm resistor, and I put a LED on. It goes through the top, but it's kind of angled. I don't know if you can see that square opening. There's two holes in a square opening, and I know this is tiny, but trust me, there's an LED right there, and it's facing down. I originally tried to put it right on top of the light pipe at the back here. That did not go over so well, and then I couldn't get underneath here for any kind of service on the class lights. So these angled pieces you see coming out are class lights. And on your model, this piece will come over and up. And right at the point where it comes up, I sawed it off with a little X-Acto saw blade. Smoothed it out, and I know it's a little hard to see, but I've got two LEDs at the end here that are seriesed. I just use CA and a lot of patience. And originally, I had the other LED right on the end of the rear walkway. I'm going to reassemble this carefully because I don't want to go through all that again. I had it all done, and then it got all jacked up. So you can see from the previous video, the LED here and here is for the number boards. And then that one down in there, we're seeing the back side of it. And remember, it's shooting straight down, and then it comes back and ties in. So this is what would be considered parallel wiring. So the one side, again, no resistor, but this is 1,000 ohm resistor, and then the other lead goes over to where all these commons are tied in for the power. I'm going through, and I got so far in the cleaning up of the wires that I thought, well, I better stop because these wires, they're going to get just the tiniest amount of CA, just enough to hold them in several little spots. And then to lift this out of there won't be too easy. Okay, let me move on to the next here. Number boards I did, ground lights. That's what I just talked about. So if you use those LEDs I'm using, I'll try to put that in the description of exactly what they are and where to get them. Just about 1K across the board is what I've been doing. And so while I was tidying, I look for a nice little place to sit the resistors as low as possible. All right, let me see what else we got here. Oh, the rear light, there it is inside that piece I was talking about. And again, just like the front headlight, it has a right here, that's a 470 ohm resistor. Let's see, what's the next one? Okay, this is the class lights. And I'm jumping around just a little bit. Okay, so again, this yellow wire does not need a resistor coming from the front. Does not need a resistor. We can't salvage the board, so that's why everything back, you see me adding resistors. So on mine, my class lights are on FX6. And then that's the only wire I'm going to put on there, because class lights on the ESU unit showed a separate CV, or not CV, I'm sorry, a function for the front headlights and another one for the rear, so you can turn them on and off individually. So I'm following suit, because honestly, I don't know a lot about class lights. It's either I didn't know if it was just on and off or what, but they're on two different functions. So the yellow wire, no resistor on FX6 is what I did. And so that takes care of the class lights in the front. In the rear, the class lights, you could see when I lift this up, because I already talked about it. So it's kind of at the end of the light pipe here and here. And again, it was shaped like a little tiny L, and all I did is cut off the end. It will be shaped, sorry, I wasn't prepared. It'll be shaped like this, with a little nub down here. It's circular, and it goes right into the metal part of the weight back here. And what I did is I just came right here and cut that off. Okay? And then in its place is where I glued the LED light facing forward, and then the wires coming up. And you gotta be so careful when you're bending these wires and stuff. The first time I did it, I kind of glued things, like I said, when I glued that light into the pipe here, that was a bad idea, because then you can't lift this up anymore. And the two LEDs were glued down on top of those two L light pipes, and something must have came loose, because they stopped working. And I thought, well, moving forward, let's learn from this. Don't do the same thing over again. The rear class light has a 2.7K resistor. That is what this is right here. And I was in the middle of testing last night. It's my fault, but since I copied this profile from another engine instead of doing each CV individually, you got to remember, I think it comes from the factory this way, to make sure that to have all these on under CV 57, I believe. On mine has 200, a value of 253. And that means in the forward direction, every one of these functions will work. The only one that I'm going to change, well, let me finish. 58 is on mine a value of 254. So 253 and 254. And the 254 makes sure that every function lights up. Now this very last pad is if you have 1.5 volt bulbs. I'm not messing with that. I don't believe I ever have. That's just a courtesy thing if you have 1.5 bulbs. So what I did is to turn all these on, that you have to have those values in 57 and 58, and that way you'll have an output on 8. But it's a little confusing, but when you use that output, you have to turn on function 27 and 28 for it to work. So what I did is I went to the function remapping, and I took function 8 and I mapped it. There's normally a 28 in that field, and I can pause this and I'll check it real quick. I mapped function 28 to 0 because function 8 I want to use for the light that's in the cab for the stand. It's like you can see the lights, 3 lights, circular. I'm sure it's just one LED in there. And so when the headlights come on, it makes sense that the gauge lights should come on as well. And then that way, when it's dark and you look through the window, you can see that the gauges are on. I'm not going to overkill them. They shouldn't look like a cab light, interior, lighting the whole interior. But when you look through the window and the lights are dim, you should easily be able to see it. So I don't have a resistor value for that because I haven't done it yet. That is probably the last 2 steps. This did have those little spring things on it to make connection. I've already removed those. And then I have to take the cab off a second time to put the ground lights in. And then there's a tiny little hole where 2 of these tiny little wires go down into. And I've already put some CA in it to hopefully capture them from trying to get away from me. And then I'll tie on to those. Everything else, that's the board and everything else is going off the bottom of that. And that'll be easy to do. So I'll snip the 2 wires, scrape them, and put my own 2 wires to extend out. And I'll put it on function FX8. And in doing so, when I turn on FX6, it turns on my front glass lights. FX7 turns on my rear glass lights. And FX8 will turn on that. It'll turn on when I hit F0. Forward or reverse, I get power from here. So that's how you separate it. Because from the factory, I don't see any way around. You have to turn on FX7 and 8 to get output from 7 and 8. I didn't want to mess with that. So let me check that CV real quick. Okay, on page 56 of the latest users, Tsunami 2 Diesel User's Guide. Right here, you've got function 28. See how it shows up like twice. One output is for FX7, which on mine will be the stand light. No, I'm sorry. What was the last? Oh, the class light. The rear class light. That turns on the front class lights. There's two of them. This turns on the rear class lights. So you can program it to be directional if you want, so it automatically changes. And then for this one, since it's under the same function, and you see it's the same function here too, they've made the CV the same number as the function, which is makes it a little less complicated. I changed that number, so I think you have to be in CV31 and have a 16 in there, and then CV32 I believe is a 1, but please double check me. And then you just go to 264 and put a 0 in here. And what that does, I mean, if you're following suit with me, I'm just saying, when you turn on your lights, assuming it's dark, right, it's going to light up that stand inside. So that's what I did. I'm going to do some more cleaning up and tack those wires in place along the speakers. And before I did so, I wanted to capture this. And the last thing I almost forgot, I did make my little shelf. And what worked really good is I just took the old board, went ahead and took the speakers and the baffle out so I could lay this right on a piece of styrene. And I put a flat edge against this so I knew that both edges were right up to it, and then I carefully used an X-Acto to trace what I needed to cut out. So, and it's just slightly bigger. And so this light, all this light that's coming up through here, we got 5 LEDs. So that is going to go right on top here. And when I'm ready for this, I will tack it down with CA, but I'm not going to kill it. I'll put like tiny little dots of CA so I can pop it back off. That's going to control the light bleed. And then this is my rear light, and it's going to go right up to the very edge here. Now I'll test it first, because like I oversized this by just a few thousandths. It's not much, but once it's in place, this bottom part goes in with little pegs, so it's not going to slide around. But when I tack this divider thing in, I'm sure I'm going to have to lightly sand it. It's going to be kind of a custom fit, and I'll take a little patience. You put the body on. If there's too much, if it starts to want to wedge or not go in very easily, then I will lightly go around the sides and give it a little bit of a sand, and then test it again. And then when it goes together and I know that the headlight is not the problem, I'll go ahead and get that as close as I can and glue that down in place. And then I may have to sand that just slightly. But that completes well, I covered basically everything. So the last thing you should see me doing is I'll have an LED on each step. So that's 4 in series. It'll tie on to the pad here, FX4. It'll be a series loop around the engine with a 1,000 ohm resistor, and it's already programmed for the output. I don't remember what CV it is. It's in the 50s, the low 50s. And on that FX effect, I'm going to turn it to, or program it to brightness 1, which is 19. So whatever function it is on yours, if you do the same thing I do, FX4, you'll look it up and say, find out which configuration you want. And like I said on mine, I'm going to go with brightness. So in that CV field, it'll be 19 for brightness 1. And then I'll go over to CV61 because that's the control. It's like a dimmer switch. In the first CV, you told it, I want it to be a dimmer. The second CV, you're telling it, okay, now we're going to set the brightness for that dim. And on all my other locomotive, it's only 25. Again, you know, I've shown how bright I like a headlight because it's realistic. These step lights around the locomotive, they are not headlights. They should be nice and dim, and they're just there so the engineer can see where he's going when he's, you know, trying to walk up the steps. And that matches very well with the front step. Now that's new to me. I've never had that on a locomotive. So the front and rear step. So with all the values I've given, that's what works for me. So that'll be a 1K on the ground lights, the step lights. The front didn't need anything. The rear needs a 1K. And I had put, that's just one LED for the rear step walkway. And then the class lights, again, no resistor in the front. The rear, I did a 2.7K resistor. And that was the best match I could get to make the front and the rear be equal in brightness. Number boards. All the number boards were done with LEDs. I've covered all that. So all 4 are in series. And I used a 1K resistor. And that gave me the brightness I was looking for in the number boards. Not too bright, not too dim. And then, like I said, I still need to find out. And it's just, you know, just testing. In fact, I should be able to go under the output for function 28, which is really mapped over to 0. And I'll see if I can't make that output. I could put a resistor, that's fine, but I still have a brightness 2 that I can use. You have 2, brightness 1 and 2. And so for the configuration of that light output for FX8, you'd put a 20. That's your output. It's telling it its brightness. You got 1 and 2. 1 is 19, 2 is 20. And then I can go into not 61, but 62 has a separate brightness register. So I can go in there and I can just play with that all day until I know if I put like a 1,000 ohm resistor, or if I want to be safe, even a 2,000, that's going to be more than enough to protect the LED. And then I can go through and just kind of play with the brightness setting until I get it exactly where I want. I mean, you can adjust from 1 all the way up to 255, so you could spend a lot of time on just that adjustment alone, trying to tweak it just right. All right, so that's it for now. I'm just gonna clean up these wires and see where I'm at. All right, so I got the cab back off. We're looking at the bottom. You see the 2 wires sticking up there. The red is going to be your positive. The other that looks more of a copper, that's your negative. and it's going to be somewhere around 1.5 volts. So I would put a pretty high resistor, because you're going to 12 volts on the decoder. So I don't know, 2,000 or 3,000 to start, and you're going to see that you'll see how bright the stand is, and then you can dial it down from there. I'll probably well, I'll see how bright it is, and then in my case, I've got brightness 2 still available. I might even have 1. I don't remember, but anyway, if it's done with a resistor, I mean, you're going to have to put a resistor on there. I would say nothing lower than a 2K, even if you're using the brightness control. So that was on the board, where it's upside down, but it says X11. And just below that it says plus. I just took an X-Acto blade and cut it as close as I could, right on the solder. And then there's 2 screws. You take those out, and you can pull this aside. Unless you plan on trying to reuse this, I don't like these just floating all over the place. To me, that's a joke. That's something else that's going to get tossed. I think I mentioned before, that's what they're supposed to line up with. And when mine came, one of them was not centered. So when I put my LEDs in here, they'll be facing down, right? So you get the light through. Let's see how well it'll show. Yeah, there you go. You can kind of see it left and right. My hand's in the way of the other one, but that's your ground lights. So since I'll be aligning them and putting them on there, on other locomotives they didn't have it, so I just put an LED up under where that is, because I mean, it's such a small feature. It is cool that they're on there. Yeah, that little bell kind of shaped looking thing sticking out the bottom. So that'll be the ground lights. I don't have anything on that function. I went ahead and finished up with the wiring. Everything is very neatly tucked. I've got 3 wires sticking up here. The green will be where I pick up my steps to go along with the front and rear light that this model comes with. So that will go on the green wire that's sticking back here with a resistor. And then the purple one, let me just double check. Step lights, purple. Yeah, I had to double check it on mine. Not that, I mean, not that you're going to be using color for color here, but on mine, I've got the pigtail of the green, because that's what lights up the very front, the very rear walkway. And I'll tie into that circuit for my step lights in all 4 corners. And then I'll have to play around with the resistance to see. And then I did my second joining of the common power. And now I have just 1 more red pigtail to pick up the step lights, the ground lights, and the stand light. Purple on mine says, let's see, ground lights, step lights. So yeah, the green wire is for the step lights, and then the purple is for the ground, the ground lights, and that should be super simple. And then the white wire is the one that I mapped function 28 over to 0, and that's going to turn on the stand that's inside here. I don't know if you'll... Well, there's the back side of it. Inside, you see that black thing. If I turn around this way, you're probably not going to be able to see. But it's the stand control and 3 of the gauges. Yeah, can't really see it. But that's the side that's meant to light up, and there will be 3 round circles that light up inside there. I'll go ahead and wire some real thin wire onto this. I think they call it magnet wire, because it's very, very fine and delicate. So I'll take some of my really thin this stuff, the hookup wire, the really thin 15 thousandths diameter, and what I'll do is I'll tie it onto those 2 wires coming off the bottom here that are real fragile, and then I will glue it right to the bottom of the cab. That way an accidental yank won't rip that right off, because it wouldn't take much at all. Those things are not much thicker than a human hair. So that's where I'm at. Did go ahead and put the shelf on here. Like I said, part of it was just cleaning up everything with wire management and getting everything super nice and low. So when I put the very last thing I'll probably do is the current keeper, because when I'm testing all this stuff, when I take it off the track, I want to know it's dead. I'm using tweezers and a lot of things that are, I'm fishing around right up on the circuit board, and the current keeper is going to keep it alive for a certain amount of time, and I don't want that. So that'll be the last step, and it'll just sit right on top of here. I've double checked it. I've got plenty of room. And then this whole side has about a 1/4 inch on the function side, and so everything's looking really good. I didn't get any light blade, so that worked very well. I think I described how I did it before. And I did just lightly tack a few little pieces of CA, or amount of CA, and got it lined up on here. And I thought I'd get some bleed, because you've got your number boards, and then below that, I can't even see it. Yeah, I can't even see it right here. Yeah, it's just a tiny bit yellowish. Yeah, there you go. That's your class lights on both sides. And it's actually good that they're recessed a little. And then I took my Miniatronics 3mm bulb, and it's on top. And then down below is the walkway. And I had it all assembled, checked every light, and it is perfect. There's no bleed through from anything. So very happy with that. And like I said, I made it just slightly larger, and one side it's pretty safe to get it flush. And then you just kind of test fit it. And it was still loose where I could lift this assembly off, because that part that's under it has the pegs that hold it in. And I know I've lifted and showed underneath. So now I've put a piece of tape up and over. I mean, this is glued on. It's not taped on. But I did that just so that assembly can't lift off. I can't see this red wire through the fans. But if I do, I'll paint it. I'll paint it black. I mean, that's just so I didn't mix up what's positive and what's negative. But it's going really good. And those 3 wires are all that's left. I'll end up having to probably do I've got a very, very small Dremel. And to get the wires from the ground lights and the step lights, I'll come back and I'll document it. But I think on the bottom here I'll be able to run the wire, and I'll just stretch it, and it'll blend in with the detail that's already there. You won't even know it's a wire, and then it kind of dips. Well, in this case it's upside down, right? So we're not dipping. will come up the side of the steps. And then I'm going to use that same technique where I put the LED on there, and I've got one of those little micro clips to hold the LED in place as the glue dries. But it's just, it takes time. You go around and step that around, and then when you're done, when I assemble it, I'll make sure that the wire fits through there when the cab's back on with no restrictions. And if there is, then I'll free up a little bit of space, however needed. And then it's basically just tying those wires in. So the ground lights, the tower, and the step lights will be on the cab, or body shell. Everything else is self-sufficient, like all these lights and everything on this. So that is just so much easier to work with. It looks clean now, but I've got yet another bunch of wires. And I just take my time, make sure it's tied down nice and clean. I'm done with these areas, so that's why I went ahead and put a little piece of like Scotch tape over that. And then, like I said, over on kind of this side, these will push off a little bit this way, is where the current keeper will sit. And it looks high, but when I put it together, it's got plenty of space, so I'm not worried about that. And that'll be the very last step, sticking that on there, taping it, and then putting the dynamic brake back on. Hopefully it's easier to put on than take off.